Welcome to today's event. I'm Gemma Monk-Hartley from Herefordshire Green Network's Building Sense Group, an initiative that started back in 2020 to bring together people, information and professional expertise to help with the challenge of making homes comfortable year-round in the face of high heating bills and cutting carbon emissions. Since 2022, we've been partnering with a local charity, March's Energy Advice, on the Future Ready Homes programme, which promotes and supports good practice retrofit of homes across the whole of the Marches area. So that's Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin and Herefordshire. It's been doing this in a number of different ways through a webinar series while you're here today. This is just one of many. We do have lots. We've been doing retrofit advice. We've been doing events like Green Open Homes that you might have heard of, as well as attending community events. And we have produced the Future Ready Homes Directory, which is a list of local recommended retrofit professionals and installers. Because the next question everyone asks us after what should I do, it is who should do it. So yeah, the directory is really useful for that. So I just wanted to pick up on the other one that I mentioned, the webinars. We are going to cover a lot of topics today because you've had quite a broad range of questions that you've asked. And we do have webinars that do a deep dive on lots and lots of different topics. So if you want to get really into the nitty gritty of solar, is it worth it? How do I balance my green tech to make it pay the best? So your heat pump solar batteries, we've got one on that. If you want to dive into green building materials, the differences between them, we've got something on that. Different building archetypes, there are lots. And I will email you and sort of outline some of those as well, so you can do a bit more research in there, because I know some of you are, this is your first session, so you might not be aware of all of those great resources that we've got. Right, so that's it. You don't want to hear from me anymore. Let me hand over to the guys at March's Energy Advice. We've got Ben and Marcus today, who have, they've been doing a great job on going through your questions and pulling a presentation together that hopefully answers those. So over to you.
Thanks, Gemma. Appreciate it. So, we are March's Energy Advice. So, yeah, I guess I'll just quickly address the change of name for those of you that do already know March's Energy Agency. We are the same people. We're not just another organisation that's stealing a very similar name. Just this week, this week, yes, we've gone through a rebranding and slight tweak of our name. Easy for me to say. So if you're wondering, like, oh, that looks familiar, it's because it is. And we're specifically talking from the Future Homes kind of team or project, which is a project that is delivered by us and funded by the Energy Saving Trust's Energy Redress Scheme. So great thanks to them for offering us that funding. Anyways, let's dive into it. I guess just a bit of brief background and introductions to us. So I'm Benjamin Webster. I'm the Technical Services Manager at MEA. I've got a background in architectural design and sustainable design, and then kind of segued into the retrofit space, and now qualified as a retrofit coordinator. Been kind of in the built environment industry for coming up to a decade now, which makes me feel like, oh, am I getting older? But yeah, so been in this space or around it for a while, and oversee the Future Ready Homes project. And Marcus, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, yeah, I'm Marcus. So I come from a building background. So I was a carpenter working on traditional buildings and on contemporary buildings for 10 or 15 years. Just in the past 5 years, I've sort of gone down the route of doing a master's degree at Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales, and undertaken some other professional training as a retrofit coordinator, passive house consultant, and been a project manager here at Marches for nearly 2 years now, running a separate project, and then just enjoying the great work that they do.
Thanks, Marcus. Yes, and I guess another bit of context on, again, it says March's Energy Agency, should say March's Energy Advice, still having to adjust to that new name. But yeah, we're a local charity based in Shrewsbury, covering the the Marches region, which is basically a lot of the Midlands, so Shropshire, Herefordshire, Telford and Wrekin, but also do work in the Black Country and also in Derby and Derbyshire as well, and have an office over there. I've got nearly 50 staff on our team, and yeah, we're independent and offer impartial energy and retrofit advice to households and also businesses and organisations as well. And yeah, been around for 27 years now, nearly 28. And yeah, we've certainly had a lot of experience under our belts over that time. And yeah, you may know us through some of the other brands or projects that we run, like Keep Shropshire Warm and Telford Energy Advice, etc. So yeah, if you've seen them, that's us. Anyway, that is enough context. Let's dive into your questions. So, like Jem said, there was a real nice spread of questions that were asked. So, yeah, thank you for sending those in. What we've done is to try and kind of group them questions together and kind of go through a series of topics that makes it as kind of useful and accessible for the kind of wider audience of people here today, as some kind of just signed up and said, just here to listen in, which is great, and it's lovely to have you here. So hopefully it's answering your questions directly while also giving information that's valuable to everyone in the room, or most people at least. And to kick off, where do we begin? What is retrofit? This is a question that came up a few times, and if you were asking, where do I find support? Maybe you're already kind of clued up around a bit about energy efficiency and know that you need to undertake it, and starting to ask the questions of what should my budget be? Can I do it room by room? In so what order? And for a few of you that are, yeah, perhaps in that stage where you're ready to really go for it and you're looking for very specific advice on your home, looking at it as a whole and wanting to get clear recommendations on what the priority areas, where should I start, then what you probably best to do is actually just commission a survey and a home retrofit plan, either from ourselves or from another organisation. There's a few kind of sole traders and other organisations out there that will offer this kind of retrofit advice service, and it's also something that we do at ME as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But yeah, so if you're kind of in that position of you're kind of just ready to go for it, and it's not just kind of one singular question, it's trying to look at the whole house and knowing where to begin, then really that kind of assessment and plan is really what you're looking for to help answer them questions. And there's a real benefit in having an independent advisor or assessor compared to, say, just going to a builder and an installer who ultimately has an incentive to sell you something that they can do and deliver for you, so they're not impartial. So having someone that is outside of that, that is just in the interest of giving you good quality advice, there's a better chance that the advice you get is going to be right for you, and is going to genuinely achieve the outcomes that you're wanting, whether that's to save money on energy bills or reduce your carbon footprint and increase your comfort, etc. So we would really recommend speaking to someone that's independent to bring into that process at the start of your retrofit journey. The question of room in room and whether you can do it a stage at a time comes up a lot. I mean, I don't know if Marcus, you wanted to speak to that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was, I remember it was one of the questions or a couple of the questions asked, can you do a retrofit room by room? And the answer is yes. I mean, ideally, in a dream scenario, you would move out for 6 months and have a totally empty house and do a whole deep retrofit with endless budget and endless availability for resources, but we can't normally do that. So most people are going to end up doing a room by room or a staged retrofit, and that's perfectly valid and perfectly feasible. I think it's important to view your home as a whole. So from the beginning of your project, make a whole house plan where you're doing room by room. Make sure that, for instance, where your insulation is meeting a different part of the house, a different room, continue it as far through as you can. So in 5 years' time, when you come to do the room above, you can just lift a floorboard and there's your insulation and your vapor barrier ready to just tape to your new one, rather than doing the easiest job to start with and causing yourselves issue down the line. But yeah, room by room is a common and really good way of doing a retrofit, as long as you have a robust plan.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, and in terms of I guess, yeah, planning out your retrofit and knowing kind of what are the right questions to be asking at the start, and also how to approach the relationships you build with contractors and installers, because that's often where people start. We've got a webinar on that, which is great, about how to get retrofit done well. So yeah, do check that out. Like Jen said, these slides will be sent to you all afterwards, so you'll be able to just click on all the links that are through these slides and go through all the videos at your own leisure. Okay, and yeah, and I said I'll just briefly kind of go over like what a survey and home retrofit plan would look like. This is based on kind of how we operate, but many other kind of providers of this service would most likely operate in a similar way. So yeah, it's a great place to start in your retrofit journey in terms of knowing what to do and actually making a clear plan, rather than, like Marcus is saying, just kind of doing what's easy and then realizing, oh, I shouldn't have done that first, I should have done that third. So yeah, this would usually involve a home visit and an assessment of the home to collect data and information about it and get a clear picture of how that building is performing currently, and how it's being used as well. So not just looking at your energy usage, but also looking at the fabric of the building, what is it made of, what its condition, is there any insulation present, if so, what, and what condition and how much. And within that there might be kind of more kind of detailed modeling of its overall performance, and getting some clear figures and data crunching to understand kind of what's your heat demand in your property, actually how much energy is required to heat your home adequately. And maybe as part of that, there might be thermal imaging surveys, airtightness tests to understand how airtight your home is. Are there any particular weak points? Is there any remedial work that might need to be done? Because that should always be addressed before trying to install any energy efficiency works. Is there just issues like damp and a gaping hole in a wall and repointing that needs to be done, or render that's falling off? Yeah, always kind of needed to take a maintenance first approach and addressing the fabric. So yeah, that's usually your starting point in terms of that assessment, and then a report being produced from that by an expert who can then give you that clear guidance on where you're at, and then information on how to get to where you're wanting to go. Like I said earlier, there's many objectives to retrofit. It's not just about builds or just about carbon. There are many co-benefits to doing retrofit, and yeah, like with working with a good assessor or advisor, they'll be able to make that plan specific to actually where you're wanting to go, what your aspirations are for your home. Is it your forever home and you're planning for your elderly mother to be moving in, and you want to convert the cold drafty kind of room at the back to make it nice and warm and cozy as a downstairs bedroom, and that's a key part of your plan. Or yeah, is it about trying to become net zero or to decarbonize as much as possible, and that's the only objective? And these are things that maybe require a slightly different approach in looking at each avenue. And yeah, a report would then be able to list out kind of the recommendations and a staged approach, like Max was saying, as is often done in stages, of what things to do, what's most important, and what order to do them in. And this is something that we're able to offer much as energy advice, as part of our kind of retrofit advice service. So if you're interested in having us support you in that, then do get in touch. Like Gemma said, we'll put some details on how to get in touch with us about that. We've had some funding on it before. We've now kind of used up that funding for surveys. We can offer it as a paid for service, but our hope is, fingers crossed, we're going to be securing some new funding soon. So if you'd like to go on a waiting list, then yeah, we'll send you details for that. But yeah, so that's a very quick rundown on what we can offer there. Let's move forward. Oh yes, and resources. So alongside coming in and giving bespoke advice for you in your home, there's also lots of other resources that might be beneficial to you if you like to do just research in your own time. So plenty of webinars, like Jen mentioned. Building Sense from HDN also has a lot of webinars. And we also have our own installer directory, the Futurely Homes directory, which is starting to compile a list of organisations, installers, and builders and suppliers as well, that operate in and around this region, around Shropshire and Herefordshire and Telford, that we've heard good things about, that people in your area, other householders, your neighbours have worked with, had good experiences and recommended to us, and we've compiled that as a list. So if you're curious on who you can find to do the work, then that's a good place to start. Okay.
And yeah, keep an eye out for upcoming events. Live events like this are always more fun than watching webinars in the past, although they are very useful.
Very true, very true. Right, okay, I think we're starting to get into some more of the nitty-gritty. Let's start off with insulation. So I don't know if Marcus, you wanted to kick us off with
I'm happy to. So yeah, sustainable materials. We've had a few questions on slightly different specifics on where certain materials can be used and what can be used in different areas, but really sustainable materials we would class as biogenic or natural materials, those made from natural products rather than petrochemicals. There's a whole range of these, such as wood fiber, cork, hemp, jute, and so on. These can be used in, well, the flexible bats, such as you might have as fiberglass. They look like these flexible fiberglass rolls. You can get wood fiber, jute, sheep's wool, and so on. They're all suitable for loft insulation, have similar thermal performance to your traditional fiberglass and mineral wool. However, they do have benefits over that. They deal with moisture far better. So you don't want to have a hole in your roof and have water pouring in, but condensation or moisture vapor moving through the insulation is dealt with far better from those. We have questions on suitability for internal walls. So similar, most of these products can be used internally. External wall insulation. Wood fiberboard is a particularly good one for external. It's got borax in it, so it is durable. Some of the other more flexible bats are not so durable externally. So cork is a very naturally durable product. That's a great one. It's not the cheapest option. Wood fiber's more cost effective. And one question about a bedroom, what would be suitable for a bedroom specifically? I mean, broadly, all of them are suitable for a bedroom. But I noted that having some moisture buffering capacity in your bedroom, you're sleeping in there, you want it to be a healthy environment. So I would choose something with the capacity to regulate the internal air quality, such as wood fiber, sheep's wool, hemp. They really deal with moisture well, keeping relative humidity low, which mitigates a lot of mold and other pathogens that you get. This is for you, I think. Can I get help with loft insulation? That's a funding question.
Yeah, well, assuming it's a funding question, it
Yeah.
doesn't specifically note it. So if this was you and actually it wasn't about funding, then do pipe up at the end of the session and we can hopefully address it. But if you're looking for like financial help with getting loft insulation, options unfortunately have become a bit more limited now. There are still means tested benefit grants out there, mainly the Warm Homes local grant scheme, which is run via local authorities. So if you are in Shropshire or Herefordshire or St Wrekin, then I'm aware that all of these are participating local authorities within the Warm Homes local grant scheme. So there's a possibility that you might be able to get loft insulation there. It's not guaranteed because they will do a retrofit assessment and then determine what their funding kind of guidance will allow them to be able to install. And if they think that loft insulation is a viable and sensible measure for you, then they'll do it for free, which is always good. So there is that option. So it's worth kind of going to your kind of local authority website, or if you have a contact there, or calling them up and inquiring around their Warm Homes Local Grant Scheme, and seeing if there is opportunity to apply, because that's been running this year and will be running until 2028. So there's still plenty of time with that scheme. There was also Eco4, but that is coming to an end now. Some of you may have seen in the news with kind of recent changes from a budget perspective. They've decided to take that kind of out of the equation in terms of a scheme being funded by energy suppliers, which from an equity standpoint is probably better, but for now it just means that there's less options for grant funding. So we're hoping that central government will come up with a solution and make sure that those that are in fuel poverty or in lower incomes looking to do energy efficiency works will be suitably supported. But there is still at least one scheme that you can apply for that might do loft insulation.
The next being older properties or listed buildings, and I'd also put buildings in conservation areas in there too. Cost-effective and breathable options. So yes, you would invariably, they would be built as vapor open construction. So you'd ideally design any alterations or improvements to maintain that breathability. Heritage England have got lots of good examples of schemes that have been accepted in the past and recommendations of how to do this. So I'd advise looking at Heritage England's website and resources, or a retrofit assessor would also have that knowledge to be able to advise the right things to do there in a way that might be accepted on a listed building, for instance, or a conservation area. The next question was on lime renders for external external render with insulating properties. I think the question had the word limecrete in it. Limecrete's actually a floor product, so it works as a floor slab. So if this has missed the question, do pipe up at the end. But a lime-based external render is a great option for a vapor open system. And yes, there are a few different versions that could have insulative properties. Some of the aggregates, which is usually sand, so sand and lime and water is what the render is. Some of that aggregate can be replaced with insulating materials such as cork, glass beads. Is there anything else? That's the two I've written down. Hemp can go on an internal plaster system, so you'd have lime and hemp in a plaster. That would need an additional weather coating on the outside if it was external to protect the hemp. Ideally.
Then we've got a question around interstitial condensation. I think there's someone asking whether the dew point moves if you add insulation to a wall. So a bit more of a technical one, and I guess for context. So a dew point is the point in which, in terms of temperature, that moisture vapor condensates, goes from a vapor to a liquid. And the short answer is yes, insulation will make an impact on where that dew point is within a wall build-up. And this is something that's very important to consider when looking to apply internal wall insulation onto a solid wall, because the more insulation that you apply, the kind of further into the wall you're potentially bringing that dew point, and that's where that risk of interstitial condensation is. Because if the point in which actually the wall is getting so cold to the point that any vapor that's kind of trapped inside the wall is going to become moisture, that's when you're going to get issues of damp and mold growth, which is obviously damaging for the building fabric and for your health as well. So the key thing there is to make sure you're using the appropriate amounts of insulation and not going too far. Usually if you speak to a supplier like Lime Green, they would be able to give some advice on this. What the kind of best practice recommendation is having WUFI calculations done. WUFI is a acronym, I think it's a German acronym, so I won't be able to reel it off for you. But the long and short is it's a kind of digital modeling software that's able to calculate with your build up and with X amount of insulation, where is that dew point going to sit? And then you can get a very definitive answer as to, okay, I can only use this much of insulation and nothing more to try and mitigate the risk of interstitial condensation. Did you want to add anything to that, or does that feel?
Well, just perhaps simply back to the beginning, sorry, but under normal conditions, a traditional wall is exposed to heat from the inside. So it's a warm object, and moisture vapor will move through it, but ordinarily that would condense in cold conditions on or just inside from the outside face, and it's able to evaporate outwards there. Doesn't cause an issue. In some cases, you might have seen blown bricks, and that's because it's condensed there and frozen. When you internally insulate, which Ben's just said, what you're effectively doing is isolating that wall from the internal heat. So you're cooling that wall down, which brings that dew point further in. Woofy can identify technically where that is. It's a modeling software, so it's not perfect, but it can identify where that is. Most suppliers would advise a certain thickness, which they've done the calculations for, that works for most walls. Some say 60 millimeters or 100 millimeters, but that would be something they could answer more specifically with their systems.
Yeah. Okay, right. Next one. This was, I think it was a room and roof bedroom and an insulation. Should I cover this?
So we talked about this. Well, I'll cover it for a moment. That's all right. Yeah, we did talk about this one yesterday, didn't we? And there was a few points to cover, but the overarching aim, whether insulating pitched roof, a flat roof, a wall, is to aim for continuous insulation. So it's joined at all junctions, and the junctions are the weak points, the natural weak points. However hard you try. So focusing on junctions would be the main thing I'd like to say there. I don't know if you've had something else to say on that.
Yeah, well, I know the question specifically, I think, was that you've already got wood fiber insulation on the walls within that room, but nothing in the sloping ceilings. I think you described it's kind of an attic room, but there's no loft. So trying to kind of read between the lines and assuming that it's a sloping ceiling in that room. So yeah, like Marcus described, trying to kind of have that continuity. If you've already got that wood fiber insulation, then perhaps you could continue with wood fiber onto them sloping ceilings, or another material that could be chosen. Like Marcus said, just having them junctions, the details of them done right, so there's no thermal bypass in between any gaps where actually heat is just going to be moving around the insulation and not being kind of blocked by it. And there's also a note in that question on a window in that room, and a kind of a gap between the wall and the window. So sounds like it's a kind of a draft proofing issue, which again might be something that you resolve while also looking at the any additions of insulation. My question might be that, is there insulation going into the reveals of that window, or is it just kind of on the kind of main surface of the wall and not actually going into where the window frame is? If not, it could be a good opportunity to have a thinner spec of insulation material, such as aerogel, which is super high performing, even at a low thickness, and then having that kind of run all the way to the window frame. And then at that time, you can also make sure that there's no kind of gaps or drafts around that window frame, so it's airtight, as well as mitigating any thermal bridging through the uninsulated elements of the wall. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, and just on the reveals, aerogel is a really good option there, but because it performs better than some of the others. But any insulation is better than, or some insulation is better than no insulation. So on those reveals, a small amount of wood fiber board or calcium silicate board or another insulation would still be better than zero insulation, where you're likely to get condensation forming. 10 or 20 mil would be better than 0 mil. So the next question was on insulating wooden floors. So this would be retrospectively adding insulation to an existing suspended floor. I'm assuming ground floor. This would be ventilated underneath, so you've got cold air blowing in through air bricks in a subfloor. There's some really good, robust details that have been produced on this by companies such as Ecological Building Systems, and others like Partel, who sell, both of these companies sell airtight membranes. Ecological Building Systems sell insulation as well, UK grown insulation. But essentially what you're trying to do is encapsulate the insulation and continue to allow the subfloor and the timbers to remain dry, remain ventilated. So you would drape a wind-tight membrane. This is the breather membrane. You'd, from above, I'm assuming, you'd drape a membrane in and out, in and out, in and out from your joists after removing the floorboards. Obviously, you drape this in, and you would end up with little nice, neat nets, not net, hammocks for your insulation in between each rafter. Sorry, each joist, which you could insert flexible insulation into. As I've said, most of the biogenic or natural materials would be suitable here. This wind-tight membrane should be taped to your wall so that wind can't get around it. Wind in these sorts of insulations can really lower their effectiveness. If you imagine wearing a woolly jumper on top of a mountain, it's not going to do much because all your warmth is being blown out through the holes. But if you put a very thin wind jacket or anorak over the top, suddenly your woolly jumper is doing a lot more. So you've got wind tight on the cold side of the insulation in the middle, and then over the top of that you would put a vapor barrier to stop moisture from your warm, humid home accessing and getting into the insulation. And that would also be taped to the wall. But yeah, that's a detail that you can find from organisations such as those I've mentioned, and they've sort of put some form of guarantee on there, which I'm not putting on what I've just said. The next one was, does it get worse or age? Does insulation degrade? So some insulations, like these flexible insulations, particularly rock wool, very flexible fiberglass or rock wool, can slump over time. Some cavity wall insulation has been known to settle and slump. The wood fiber flexible wood fibers are far more rigid than the rock wool, so it doesn't slump so much. It is still flexible, bendy like a fleece, but it is more rigid than you're used to seeing with rock wool. And just a note on PIR, which is your Kingspans and your Celatexes, that this does degrade, much as they would like to think it doesn't, and they don't advertise this, but PIR is an expanded foam insulation made from petrochemicals, so PIR or PUR, both very similar. And each little pocket is filled with a very insulative gas, whereas wood fiber and natural materials are filled just with air. So this gas has a lower thermal conductivity than air, so that's how they get their really high performance. But over time, this gas leaks out. So these super products are off-gassing into your home for the first few years, and after they've finished off-gassing chemicals, they are just filled with air, like all the other insulations. So they do degrade, and their tested performance in situ is lower than their claimed performance, or worse than their claimed performance. It also shrinks slightly, so shouldn't really be used between timbers. It often is used between studs, between floor joists, or between rafters. But in reality, it has a small shrinkage as it off-gasses. So then you have small gaps around all your insulation, which the flexible products don't, because you would cut them 10, 20 mil oversize and squeeze them tightly in. So that as the timbers expand and contract, they take that up, and they don't degrade, so they don't move.
Yeah.
Nice. Guys, are there any ways to diagnose if they're faulty, if they're failing? So cavity wall insulation is worth.
Yeah. So with cavity wall insulation, sorry, yes, you can have a commission of boroscope survey where small holes are drilled and a camera is inserted, like an endoscope, and you can actually just see. So an experienced assessor would know where to look for common weak points there. Like you just mentioned, thermal imaging would be another one. So you'd heat the house up on a cold day and you'd potentially be able to see gaps in cavity wall insulation. We often see it with sloping ceiling or loft insulation with a thermal imaging camera, where you just have one clearly, obviously missing panel. where someone just hasn't bothered or has forgotten or couldn't quite reach the corner. Yeah, that's how any other diagnostics.
Yeah, I think for insulation, you've covered it there. Yeah.
Is that what you were asking, Jem?
Yeah, thank you.
Real.
Cool. All right, let's
And that is
move.
something that some of that we can conduct. We do thermal imaging at March's Energy Advice. We
Yeah.
don't really do boroscope, although we have some capacity to do that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So if there's something you're more interested in, then feel free to reach out to us about it, and we can either offer something or signpost you to someone that can.
Yeah.
All right, nice. So yes, just to continue or kind of wrap up on the insulation side of things, there was a question around suppliers. There's a list of them here, all UK based. I don't know if there's anything you want to say on the suppliers at all, Marcus.
No, well, I'm going to say something. Yeah, we've mentioned these already, and they have systems and build-ups that they have had certified and have designed and done thermal modeling and hybrid thermal modeling with things like Woofy. So they're selling great systems, and really most of these, all of these are really happy to give advice on the phone, and with the view that hopefully they're going to sell some products, but they're happy to give advice nonetheless. So get in touch if you need a system designing for your home with someone like these companies.
Yeah, and if you're wanting to dive a bit deeper into this, we've got a couple of webinars that might be relevant. One on retrofitting a solid wall home. So if you do have an older, traditionally constructed property, that could be well worth a look for you. And if the kind of greener, sustainable material angle is really what you're wanting to try and understand as much as possible, we've got a webinar specifically on that. So yeah, do check those ones out for more detail. Sorry, I don't know if other people can see Constantine's messages trying to buzz. It's very annoying.
They are coming up.
They are.
Sorry. Wonder if I can just close Teams.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't. Well, hopefully we'll try and ignore them.
Yes. If it keeps buzzing, then
I'll close Teams, but I'd have to stop
yeah.
sharing.
And yes, and then also this is kind of more for when we send the slides out. If you're interested in kind of real life case studies of some of the things around what we've spoken about there in insulation, then there's a few links here to articles we've written. So do check out the links. They're really great, actually. The stories to kind of get you inspired around what's possible. So I would really recommend having a read and looking at that YouTube video as well. Okay, right. That's all the insulation stuff. We're now into the world of heat pumps. Unsurprisingly, lots of heat pump questions here, and yeah, I think you had quite a bit to say on these.
Probably
two,
did. It's
so
5:30 when we were doing this.
Yeah.
We've started to speed up. So heat pump viability. Just in short, a heat pump will work in any home. If it's well designed, it's going to work. How to improve insulation and minimum requirements. So we had a question about what's the minimum insulation. The laws of thermodynamics just state that it will work. Electricity is more expensive than gas, but you should be looking at improving your insulation for a gas or oil system as much as with a heat pump system. The difference being electricity is around 4 times the cost of gas. So what you can do is look at trying to reduce your heat demands. It's a very difficult figure to put to this, but in my research, it's sort of around 20%, 25% reduction in heat demand will provide sort of comparable running costs or cheaper to your existing gas system. I've not looked into oil systems particularly. I know that can vary quite substantially. But the sort of bottom line is get a good engineer and a heat pump will heat your home. Moving on to larger houses, again, some huge buildings, churches, big houses. If you have a larger house, you need a larger heat pump. It's just based on heat demand rather than size or volume. So if you have a larger heat demand, you'll need a larger heat pump, and that is all modelled by your engineer. I know that we have had historically some engineers that perhaps haven't done robust designs, and that might be where these questions are coming from, and I really do sympathise with that. But just trying to be clear that a heat pump will heat your home. What's next? Specification of the plumbing system. Happy to take that or me. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So this one on plumbing. There's a couple of questions here. One was I think a household that have got a quote from Octopus that they weren't kind of particularly satisfied with. There was kind of recommendations for lots of new radiators and radiator replacements, and I think it was ultimately, is it worth speaking to someone else for a better design? Or a different design? And short answer again, we would say is yes. Octopus ultimately are doing a great job of trying to roll out as many heat pumps as possible, but that is their focus, getting as many heat pumps out there as possible. The focus is not trying to design the most efficient systems as possible. So their systems are running at higher temperatures, kind of 55-degree flow temperature heat pumps, which is not optimal. So if you're looking for the best design system, Octopus is not really the one to go for, even if it is cheaper. So I think the person asking the question asked about HeatGeek, whether they're worth going to. There's certainly people we recommend. They do really great work, but there will be other heat pump kind of spec designers and installers that will be able to give you a far better kind of specification and outcome in that. So it's definitely worth getting some more quotes and shopping around to get a better spec. And then the question on pipe bore sizes. I don't know if you want to cover that.
So just touch briefly. You said HeatGeek. I just wanted to be clear. You said it quite quickly that
yes.
HeatGeek are a really great training organisation that act almost as you become an affiliate. To trade as a HeatGeek, you have to have done their really robust training, and they're delivering some of the, if not the best heat pump training in the UK, I think. So you can be confident that they're going to design a good system. There are other heat pump designers and engineers who will also design a good system who are not HeatGeek. But sorry, I just wanted to touch on that.
Thank you.
The bore size and pipe work. So to get the lower flow temperatures that improve the efficiency of a heating system, particularly a heat pump system needs far lower temperatures. The larger bore size does allow for greater flow. That being said, you can install a heat pump even with micro bore 10mm pipe. It's been known to be done and to deliver an efficient system. That would be more efficient if all the pipe work was at optimal size, but a heat pump can be put into some really challenging situations and still deliver heat at an affordable price. So talk to a good engineer about that. It has been said that you can't use a heat pump with micro bore, and that's not true.
Cool. And then the final one on here, a straightforward question of is, would a heat pump be cheaper than direct electric heating? And a nice simple answer of yes, it would be. As direct electric heating is, well, by definition, 100% efficient, which sounds good in a sense. But when you compare it to a heat pump, which even a really poorly performing heat pump that's really badly kind of optimized, say it's only delivering 200% efficiency, that's still twice as efficient and therefore half the cost. And usually, if it's being installed well, it's going to be 300, 400%, maybe even higher in very small cases. So it's going to be significantly cheaper, maybe even a quarter of the price to heat your home on a heat pump compared to direct electric heaters. So yes, definitely cheaper.
And I just wanted to add in there, because I think, Marcus, you said at the start of this, but like the scary thing about electric is it's 3 to 4 times the price of gas. But how it works and how it becomes cheaper is what Ben just said. So you're getting those performances, the seasonal coefficient of performance of a 3, a 4, a 5. If it's a 3, 3.5, you're looking at the same, it actually works out the same price as what gas would. If you're getting into the regions of 4s and 5s, is costing you less. HeatGeek, I think their average is a minimum of before, or certainly for their top installers anyway. So you really can make savings from there, and particularly when you start then looking at electricity tariffs, you don't have that with gas. It's a single cost, whereas electricity you can have cheap overnight rates and that sort of thing. So you can start making even more savings. Sorry, just wanted to chuck that in.
No, thank you. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, perhaps a bit vague earlier that yes, a gas boiler might be up to 95% efficient, so get less than 1 unit for every back of heat for every unit you put in, whereas heat pumps are, upwards of 300% efficient, as you just said, which is great. And just on the Heat Geek efficiencies, they do actually offer a service that guarantees an efficiency. So they design and install a system, but they have said it will deliver X, 3.7%, 370% efficiency. And so you can pull them up on that a year later if it's not working. So it's within their interest to deliver what they're saying and do a good job.
Nice. All right. Heat pumps continued. There's still a bit more.
You're in luck.
Yes. So, is there a list of qualified ground source heat pump maintenance engineers? So, with this one, we're not aware of a particular list just about maintenance engineers, but ultimately, any kind of well qualified and knowledgeable, experienced heat pump engineer should be able to do suitable diagnostics and maintenance on a heat pump. A good place to start would be going to MCS and their lists. They're the Micro Generation Certification Scheme. MCS, you'll be able to find them online quite easily, and they have their own kind of directory or search list, so you can find an installer locally to you that are certified through their certification scheme, and that is kind of the kind of UK like industry standard for maintaining kind of high quality of renewable kind of heating and generation installs. So that would be a good place to start. I also mentioned earlier our own internal directory, the Futurely Homes directory. We've also got installers on there for heat pumps, so that can also be a great place to look as well if you're wanting something that's local and around the corner, someone to come and view your ground source heat pump or other heat pump as well. Okay, next question. Solar PV plus batteries to help air source heat pump running costs and how to work out battery size. Yeah, this was an interesting one. And yeah, I'll start off with the solar element, and then we can talk about the sodium and lithium.
I've just lost your sound. I don't know if it was just me.
Oh,
can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Brilliant.
Okay,
we're good.
I think maybe it's Gemma, it might be your yeah. People can hear us, so we'll continue on. So starting off with that first question around solar, it's a good question to ask because often people are looking at these technologies in tandem. So key things to think about is when you need your heating most is in wintertime when it's cold, obviously, and that's also the time that we get the least amount of sunshine. So solar PV obviously generating energy collected from the sun. You're not going to be generating as much of your own electricity from your solar array at the time that you need that electricity. So expecting your heat pump system to be fully powered all winter long by a solar array is unlikely, because particularly when the sun sets and you're wanting to have a nice warm house in the evening when it's dark, you're not going to be obviously producing any of your own energy at that point. So it's not feasible to just be like, right, I've got my solar array and the heat pump, and now I'm off grid. That's not going to be possible. But having battery storage can be a game changer in that, because then you can then generate the energy when there is sun, store it in your battery, and then use that energy when you need to use it. So maybe you're at work during the day, your solar array is generating lots of energy while you're away from home. It's storing up in the battery. You've got your smart heating controls, so your heat pump to kind of have a bit of a boost in the evening, perhaps, and that's when it starts using the energy from your battery, and then it does start to help really kind of keep them running costs down through using your own free and green energy source from that. So hopefully that's kind of answered that question.
The only thing was on sizing, and we would just suggest talking to a solar installer and your heating engineer. Heating engineer can design and calculate the peak load, so the most amount of energy you're ever going to need at one point, and the solar person designing your solar array could ensure that your solar panels and battery can accommodate that, or at least majority of it, and you can weigh up cost against space and resources.
Yeah. And then, the question on sodium batteries versus lithium batteries, we'll be very honest and say that this is kind of outside of our own expertise. We don't have any kind of direct kind of experience with sodium batteries or their comparisons or whether one's better than the other. And there'll be no use in us just reading off what we might be able to Google, because you could also go and Google and find the same answers. So we won't claim to be experts. From what we do understand is that sodium batteries are often a lot larger. So if space is at a premium in terms of where you're keeping your batteries, then that might be a reason to go for lithium instead. But yeah, I don't think from our expertise we can say too much more.
Well, no, just to reiterate that lithium in batteries creates very energy dense batteries. So that's why they're commonly used in systems that we have at the moment. They can be the smallest batteries around, or they have historically been. But the ethical sourcing of lithium is perhaps an issue. Sodium claims that it doesn't need the heavy metals in the same way. So there's an argument that sodium could be more ethical, but that is, you Google away yourselves. That's as far as we got.
Oh, and then this final question here. Someone that had an old LPG boiler and a wood burner with a back boiler, basically asking, is it worth making the change, as they're clearly very familiar with how their boiler works, despite it being very old. It's easily manipulative, even if it is quite a manual system. I'm assuming when they're referring to the wood burner there, having to load it up with logs. So is it worth the change? I think with this one, it's one that where in a lot of ways we kind of need more information to give an honest answer. It very much depends on your situation, whether actually having a very manual system is going to be suitable for you for the long run. Is there going to be a point where it's going to be just too backbreaking work to be constantly lugging in solid fuel into your wood burner to keep warm? And actually, I think something a bit more hands off is going to be better for you in the long term. So the question of is it worth it is a tricky one to answer. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Only I suppose that the air quality aspect to that as well. With burning solid fuel, there's obvious air quality impacts, so that's worth considering in your design or your plans.
And from simple, I guess, kind of agenda of ours as MEA from a decarbonisation perspective, we'd say yes, it's worth it to radically decarbonise and move away from LPG onto electric. So it depends on your aims. And then
back to a previous question.
Kind of run electric heating from PV successfully. So I think we've covered that. So not on its own
directly.
Not directly. It will support, but not going to cover everything.
But battery storage can help that happen.
And I think we've got that on actually the next slide. Yes, well, the one right at the end there, the link to a YouTube video, that's a recording of another webinar that we did in the past by an organisation that did a great pilot project in Rugeley, where for a number of homes they combined heat pumps, battery storage and solar arrays, and did very minimal fabric improvements and very minimal insulation measures or air tightness, and just focused on optimizing those three technologies to work together, and achieved up to 85% bill savings in these properties compared to without those technologies, which is quite impressive and quite interesting. So if you're really curious on that kind of renewable tech front and optimizing it, really recommend checking out that webinar. And then there's a whole host of other kind of resources and webinars here as well. So if you really are curious on the heat pump side of things, yeah, that top one is really kind of deep dive from my colleague Tony on heat pumps. We've got a few other kind of resources and articles and signposting to other organisations we respect at the Green Register. So there's plenty of information out there online for you to dig into and understand a bit more about heat pumps. Okay, next topic, air tightness and how to check. Max, if you wanted to.
Yeah, so that's something that we also do using this blower door you can see there, air tightness testing equipment in conjunction with thermal imaging to identify leaks in your home, air leaks in your home. As it says here, usual suspects are around windows and doors where surfaces, waste pipes and electric cables have been drilled through the fabric, the external fabric, and then not properly filled, through loft hatches from your unheated loft space into, we put loads, 400 mil of insulation in your loft and perhaps 400 mil on your loft hatch, but there's a big gap around it so that you can still open it and access it. And it's important not to confuse air permeability, which is what we're testing with this, which is the drafts coming in through unplanned holes in your house, and vapor permeability, which we were talking about with insulation earlier on, which is what we call breathable. Can it breathe? But that's the ability for it to allow moisture vapor to move. So continuing briefly, with this equipment, we can come to your home, or someone can come to your home, and you install it in a door, such as your front or back door, and that fan that you see at the bottom there is calibrated with a computer, and it measures the amount of air that is passing through that fan to maintain a pressure difference, a set pressure difference from inside to outside, a nominal 50 pascals pressure difference, which is sort of similar to exposing your house to quite high winds. So if you had sort of 25, 30 mile an hour winds, I think, that naturally creates a pressure difference. And on those windy days, you'll be able to go around your house with the back of your hand and feel wind coming in around your windows, perhaps. And that's what we're exaggerating here. And then, as I say, with the thermal imaging camera, you can see the cold air cooling the surfaces around windows, and it's really useful for us to be able to diagnose and prescribe solutions. It's also really useful for the householder. We've had really good feedback in the past and continuing that people really enjoy the thermal imaging, and it's really engaging, and sometimes it just clarifies something that they kind of already knew. This room's always cold. I can always feel a draft. But it is surprising how often people are happily surprised when they see a cold draft coming in. Oh, it's always been cold through here, and then they can see it, and it's a really, really nice experience for me, even if we are in a cold house.
Yeah. And it's also, I guess, kind of coming back to what was talked about at the start, with understanding your building and perhaps getting a baseline. Like looking at air tightness and improving it can be a great focus area for improving the thermal performance of your building, particularly if maybe you've got a smaller budget, but you still want to try and increase thermal performance, maybe prepping for a heat pump and wanting to make sure that heat pump is working as sufficiently as possible and that the spec is, the smaller size as you need. Doing something like having a blower door test as a diagnostic test, and then using that to be like, okay, here's my baseline. I'm currently at, air pressure changes, air changes an hour of, say, 10 or 13, and I want to get down to 5 or below, then it's where we've been like, okay, that's where I'm starting. Let's do lots of draft proofing. Let's do another test. Okay, have we brought it down? Okay, we're nearly there. See where are the gaps left. All right, this is still a gap under that, that floor. Let's plug that. So it's a nice kind of tangible, kind of quite tactile way I've been like trying to improve that performance a piece at a time.
And air tightness measures or sort of draft proofing or super draft proofing can be really cost effective way of improving your home. It can be relatively simple in many cases for quite a lot of gain. Reducing drafts also will improve your thermal comfort, so you'll feel warmer even if the actual air temperature isn't much warmer. It's also quite low risk. We talked earlier about adding insulation, particularly internal wall insulation. You have to consider dew points and condensation risk, interstitial condensation. With air tightness measures, you're really just stopping drafts. It's quite simple.
Presumably as well with a lot of properties, if you've done all the fundamentals, so particularly if you've got double glazing and they're fairly well installed, although that is an air tightness question, if you've got your cavity walls filled, if you're in an old solid property, they can actually there can be a decent level of thermal performance from the fabric of the building anyway. And I mean, am I right in thinking that air tightness could be one of your biggies that really makes the difference? And like I say, is so much cheaper than thinking about internally or externally insulating all of your external walls, which can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah, often far less invasive as well. You're talking, like you say, about internal wall insulation or external, and you've got scaffolding up the outside and all sorts of things. And it can air tightness measures can form a large part of your saving, and it might be enough to take you over that edge of cost parity with your previous gas boiler. Just having to reduce your outgoings by 20%, 15% maybe, and then you might be able to deliver that.
Great. All right. Next up, we've got Windows. So I think there was just one or two questions on Windows this time around. A nice straightforward one, and I guess really the right question to be asking is, what are the best types of windows to have fitted? The context was a 1980s detached house, and double glazing from the mid-90s. So, I mean, the simple answer is the best options are high performance triple glazing. That would be the shortest answer to give, because they are the best performing windows out there. And then it's just a question of, well, what can you afford? What's your budget? And what's the best performing you can go? Because you can also have high performance double glazing, and there can often be kind of, you might disagree, Marcus, but kind of only a marginal difference between the kind of high performance triple and high performance double, but sometimes quite a gap in cost in that, just because there's just something about triple glazing that an extra zero or an extra figure can just kind of land on that. So that is ultimately the best option. But I think something very important to consider with window installation is the installation, just as much as the spec of the windows themselves, because you could have a high performance triple glazed window put in really badly, and then, like we are just speaking about on the previous slide on drafts, then you just get all this kind of air leakage through the edges, or maybe it's actually not matching up with any insulation that's on the walls, and there's a big kind of thermal bridge or gap where a load of heat loss is happening. So then you've just spent thousands on these new windows, but you're getting loads of heat loss all around them because they haven't been fitted well. So making sure that they're fitted really, really well is just as important as the spec of the windows that you're getting.
I'd agree. I mean, we were at a property just yesterday where they've got not the cheapest windows, so very nice aluminium coated modern double glazed windows. But unfortunately, less than 6 years ago they were installed, and there's air getting around the outsides of them. So from outside around the frames, and then in where the plaster meets them. Unfortunately, they weren't installed with air tightness tapes or with much care and attention by the looks of things. So the best course now is probably to just silicon around that gap, which is a remedial, which will help, but it's not very long lasting or robust. Might need to be done again in a few years' time, for instance, as building elements move. Whereas, care and attention to installation is quite easy when you're doing it, but retrospectively is much more difficult. I suppose just on window design there was also, in this particular property, air getting around the seal on a fixed light. So as the opening lights, which is where you might expect air to get in through the seals, they were mostly performing quite well. But in this particular window system, there was air getting around the factory fitted fixed lights, which is I've sent them back to the manufacturers to complain about that. That's not on, I don't think. But as Ben said, triple glazing is the best system we've got at the moment. It is more expensive, but we need to be careful not to compare our triple glazed windows to our local UPVC guy who's going to spray foam in some very poor windows. But that's not a fair comparison. Perhaps if you look at the high end double glazing units compared to the high end triple glazing units, you'll have a fairer price comparison there. Yeah, and just plug 21 Degrees of a UK-based company who produce high-performance windows, and yes, not the cheapest windows you're ever going to see, but they are really quite competitive in pricing. So I'd recommend having a look there if you're interested in getting high-performance windows. Other suppliers are available.
Yeah, nice, well covered.
And then sash windows was the next one. What actions for original wooden sash windows? Well, yes, I love sash windows. They have a very good ventilation properties. They're designed very well so they can circulate air nicely through the out through the bottom, in through the top. Is that right? Well, circular motion. But they have been known to be drafty. But there's all sorts of organizations and companies who specialize in draft proofing original windows. So inserting draft strips where there originally wouldn't have been any, repairing bits that have rotten, because that often happens in old windows that haven't been well maintained. You can often take out the single glazed panes if the frames and glazing strips are large enough. You can take the single glazed panes out and insert very low profile double glazed panes, which would help on the performance. Yeah, I think that's it really. If you want to keep them, which is fair enough, you can improve them. I suppose we talked about secondary glazing as well.
Yeah, I mean that's also another option of if you're keeping your original windows, and say you can't replace the single glazed for slimline double glazing, then secondary glazing options is another way to go, and it's quite a kind of broad spectrum with secondary glazing of a very simple methods of kind of basically cling film and a hairdryer and spraying it on, all the way through to kind of install a fitted secondary glazing, that is literally just kind of almost another window inside of the original window. That will be obviously operable. So that's also options to consider there if for whatever reason you don't want to keep your windows, or you want to change them but you can't because it's a listed building or conservation area, and conservation area said no, which I know can be the case for many.
And we do have a case study from a couple in Clunbury that had that situation, a 400-year-old listed farmhouse. They came up with a fantastic solution, beautiful solution, and performs really well, and they can still open their windows, which is
what was it? Was it a secondary glazing system?
Yeah, almost secondary, but it's essentially made it like triple glazing.
Nice, yeah.
And yeah, they are beautiful, and it kept exactly the same from the outside. So a really good solution.
It's great to see.
Lovely. All right. Yes, there is one question on ventilation, which is really great to see, because ventilation is often an overlooked part of retrofits. We're always focusing on trying to get a property more airtight, trying to get more insulation in, trying to keep the heat in, etc. But often forgetting air quality, and that we need fresh air to have a good internal air quality, to be able to breathe, to live happy, healthy lives inside our homes, and not just be trapped with stale, moist air that can't get out. So the general kind of rule or mantra can be, where you insulate, you must ventilate, or you must at least verify your ventilation strategy currently and check whether it's adequate, and still adequate if you're improving the insulation or airtightness in the property, because you do need the airflow, and I'm sure everyone likes to feel like they've got some fresh air coming in and not just kind of sitting in a house that feels stale and damp. So just to kind of give, I guess, a rundown of ventilation strategies and options from the kind of bare minimum basic through to what we consider best practice. So your bare minimum really is having mechanical extract ventilators or extractor fans in your wet rooms being where you're producing moisture. So kitchen, bathrooms, utility rooms, these are the common areas. So having extractor fans in there that are running at low speeds continuously, so they're usually fairly quiet. They might have a humidity boost on them, so when you have your shower and there's some increase in humidity, they speed up and are extracting more of that moist, stale air out of those rooms and then go back to a normal kind of continual running speed in the background. So have those, and then it's crucial that they're then paired with trickle vents in your windows, because that's where fresh air is going to be coming in. So when the stale air is extracted out of the wet rooms, you're basically almost depressurizing the internal space, and that lower pressure is going to draw in fresh air through those trickle vents. So that's how that's working. And then another key part of that is having undercuts on your internal doors, because actually if the doors are kind of really well sealed against the carpet at the bottom of the door and there's no air movement, then you're not going to have that kind of continuity of airflow throughout the house. So the extract of the bathroom and that kind of pressure difference there is not going to have an impact on the bedroom on the other side of the hallway if actually there's no kind of airflow in between. So having a minimum of an 8 mm gap at the bottom of your door, that's kind of what kind of UK regulation stipulates. Well, technically 7.6 mm, but for I don't know why it's that specific, but say 8 mm is all you need. So you don't need a big kind of gaping hole at the bottom, but just enough so air can flow through. That creates, in effect, a whole house system to have kind of a basic level of managing air quality and moisture in your home. But like I say, that is very much the bare minimum. And I know, Marcus, you
Well,
probably want to comment on trickle vents, perhaps.
I was just going to comment on the air coming in through trickle vents and elsewhere through areas that are not very airtight, so unplanned routes and trickle vents. You say that's where we get our fresh air. I'd probably just like to point out that that's external air. That doesn't mean it's fresh. If you're living on a busy road, you're getting busy road air. If you're living next to a sewage plant, you're getting sewage plant air. If you're living in the middle of the countryside with no air pollution, you can assume you're getting relatively fresh air, although that might be passing through cobwebs and other pathogens in your trickle vents or up through your bath panel, around your windows, through areas of your house, down through your loft, that you might not want to be breathing that air. So that is providing breathable air, but it is really, I would say, the sort of the basic minimum that you'd want to have breathable air. And moving forwards, perhaps you'd look at something that's providing what I would call fresh air.
Oh, yes, so it's kind of the system that I described there, the extractor fans would be referred to as DMEVs, decentralized mechanical extract ventilators. A kind of step up from that is CMEV, so centralized mechanical extract ventilators. So similar in many ways, but rather than having individual extractor fans that are just in kind of wet rooms and operate independently from one another, you'd have a centralized unit and then ducting to your rooms to extract wet air. And am I right with CMOs that it's also supplying fresh air as well, or just
No, but it'd
extract?
be paired with designed vents, whether that be trickle vents or filtered air vents or unfiltered air bricks or air vents.
So a slightly different variation, centralized, obviously because it needs duct work, that's far more kind of intrusive and disruptive, because you've got to then actually have then ducts have got to go somewhere, whether it's kind of within the floors or between the floor of the first floor and the ceiling of the ground floor, or kind of trying to then do kind of boxing to boxing ducts, etc. And you need a unit to keep the centralized unit in. So they're all things to consider if you want to go for a centralized mechanical extract ventilation system. And then up from that is heat recovery ventilation systems. So again, you can have single room heat recovery units. So this is where there's a heat exchange inside the extractor fan ventilator. So it's extracting that kind of moist, stale air, and then the external air, hopefully the fresh air that's coming in, they're passing by that that heat exchanger, so any warmth from the internal air is then warming the fresh air as it comes in, and then you're not losing heat from ventilating, because this is often kind of an argument that kind of comes up when looking at retrofit. It's like, oh, I'm doing all this kind of energy saving and heat loss saving measures. Why do I want to put more holes in my walls and like extract all that? And it's like, yes, it's frustrating, but you need to do some of it. But a workaround is having a heat recovery unit to minimize the amount of heat that you're losing through your ventilation system. So, like I say, you're going to have single room units. Personally, I've heard kind of mixed reviews on how effectively they can work. Sometimes they can get into a bit of a kind of circular system because it's so contained that the air that's coming out is then just kind of being sucked back in, and then actually no new air is actually coming in. It's just kind of cycling through the same air, but it may very much kind of vary on the kind of quality of the system and the supplier. So it may well work really well or it may not, but it's certainly an option to consider. And then the gold standard, which you can see on here, is mechanical ventilation with heat recovery as a whole house system. So similar to the CMEV model that I described, this is again having a central unit with ducting, but it's not just extracting air from the wet rooms, it's also supplying air directly to the other rooms, other habitable rooms in the house. And again, there's a heat exchanger centrally sourced in that unit, whether it's up in in a plants room, in a utility room, in a loft space in some cases. So then you've got kind of ductwork extracting the stale air, and then a heat exchanger heating the fresh air, and then that fresh air being supplied directly to the other rooms. And that is, yeah, by far the best kind of ventilation system that you can go for, and ultimately what we'd recommend. And so in lots of cases that might be just a bit too disruptive or expensive, but ultimately that is the best option that you can go for. Anything to add on ventilation?
No, I mean, yeah, it does require ducting, so it can be quite disruptive, but yeah, that would be supplying filtered, heated air to your habitable rooms like bedrooms and living rooms, and extracting moist, polluted air from your wet rooms, and using that heat in the moist, polluted air at the heat exchange in the unit to warm up the air. It can be around 90+% efficient, so you're really maximizing the efficiency of your system once you've got there. And obviously there's no cross-contamination between the incoming and outgoing air. They're obviously totally separate, but perhaps worth pointing out. And yeah, filtering the incoming air. So if you are on a busy road, you're getting really top standard indoor air quality.
Yeah, and it really makes an impact. It's like being in properties with MVHR, you notice it. Like if you're someone like me that's been used to kind of in older properties that have just bog standard air, by a road, it's like, wow, it feels just feels really nice to be in a house that's so well ventilated and just super clean.
And on your single room heat recovery systems, I agree, I've heard mixed reviews, but I think they can provide a really robust sort of second best in a situation where you don't want to be installing ductwork. It would involve multiple fans usually, so it'd be designed as a whole house system, not just a fan in your bathroom or a fan in your downstairs loo. It'd be designed as a whole house system, and if designed well, it should all work together like a whole house MVHR without any ducting. The jury's out. Some people do disagree on that, but I think lots of companies are doing a really great job designing well-functioning systems, which I believe filter the air to the habitable rooms and extract the polluted, moist cooking air and bathroom air out.
Yeah.
And still quite like over 85% efficient at recovering the heat.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and then a final note is also I've seen kind of the single room heat recovery units used as a supplement to a whole house system in VHR. Say if the centralized MVHR unit is getting to kind of all rooms bar one, and it's just not feasible to get that kind of final duct to that room. And I've seen it where they've then had a single recovery unit just for that space or that part of the house to be able to just make sure that the whole house is covered. So yeah, I have kind of seen these kind of hybrid systems. So yes. Aware of time, so we'll leave that there. Hopefully that's covered kind of most on ventilation, and there is a few other kind of resources to go more deeply into it. And I think we're coming to the end, fortunately, which is great. We really have kind of gone to the wire in the end. So just mopping up a few final questions that came in that kind of didn't fit into other slides. Is the grant for solar panels at the moment? Not specifically for solar. I mentioned the Warm Homes Local grants for those on low incomes, or some proxies as well if you've got kind of long-term health conditions, and there's other kind of similar criteria that might be able to access you funding through your local authority. They might do solar panels as part of what they offer to you, but it's not guaranteed. But there's currently no actual grants for the kind of capital cost of installing solar. There is the Smart Export Guarantee to be able to get paid to export energy that you don't use back to the grid, which is a good incentive on top of the free energy that it's providing to you to increase the kind of cost benefit to yourself. But yeah, no grants and no capital grants right now.
This is one on should copper be weighed in for its monetary value if you're doing a heat pump system, remove all the pipes and cash it in? Well, I would advise just talking to your heating engineer. Copper obviously does have a good scrap value, but in many cases you would be looking at reusing a lot of the pipe work. In an ideal scenario, you wouldn't do any new pipe work and you use all the old pipe work. But that's on a case by case, and just talk to your heating engineer, and whatever's not in use, yes, we could remove.
Yep. And then on the final one, someone in a rental property asking, what can they do considering they, don't have kind of control over a lot of what happens with the building itself. We spoke earlier on the airtightness slide around kind of how much you can do from a kind of airtightness and draft proofing perspective. And I think that's a great way to go if there's kind of limited that you can do in terms of altering the actual building fabric. And there is a webinar here that we'd recommend checking out on getting winter ready in quick wins for a cozier home. So do look at that. That'll have some relevant tips for rental properties. And I will quickly add that with recent news from the Warm Homes Plan and a response to a consultation around energy efficiency in the private rental sector, do pester your landlord to get them on with improving the efficiency of their rental portfolio and their tenanted property, because they do have an obligation to bring it up to a higher standard by 2030. So you can pester them with that and say, can you get on with it, please? Because I would like a warmer home. Yep, I think we've made it.
Yeah, well, there were just a few more questions in the chat.
Okay.
You try and fire them to us, and we'll see.
1 minute. We can keep running over if people are happy to stay.
Yeah, okay, right. Well, let's see what we've got.
Yeah.
I know one of them was what about overheating issues? What do you recommend? South-facing properties, lots of glass, getting too hot in the summer. I know this has come up a few times and comes up more and more. There has been a webinar on it, which I'll share. Yeah, you guys have to say.
Yeah, well, building regulations now has Part O, which is for overheating. It is becoming more and more of an issue, and we're in a warming climate. And as we increase the insulation and air tightness of our homes, it will become more of an issue. So yeah, I suppose south-facing windows, a lovely idea, but just beware, design carefully. In a nutshell, without going into too much detail, is that okay?
Yeah, and definitely, and think about shading and all that sort of thing. But
external shading, temporary shading. Those you could put that up in the midsummer months.
Yeah, brilliant. Someone has said any help in particular with listed buildings. That's Paul Wright. I'm not sure what he was referring to in particular.
Well, I suppose we pointed to you earlier to, is it Heritage England? They're very good on that. Not much further there from me.
Yeah, they've got quite a good kind of document, or I don't know if this describe it as a note that they make, and it's quite well kind of broken down in terms of kind of different energy efficiency measures, and they say like this, this is likely to be approved, and could be approved in some cases, and this won't be approved, and it's real kind of just a bit more clarity outside of just speaking to a conservation officer what is likely to kind of go through listed building consent and what wouldn't. So yeah, we can put a link to that. It's a publicly available resource in Heritage England and gives a lot more clarity on what could be approved in a listed building and what not. So would recommend having a look at that.
Lovely. Rosalind has asked, what form does the aerogel come in?
Multiple forms, but it's quite friable in itself, so it usually comes laminated to a fabric or rigid paper boards, like a board system, like a plaster board or a tile backer board.
Great, thank you. Are there any issues you can see with taking a wall back to brick internally, but which is externally rendered, and installing a false wall, but with no insulation? Will there be a risk of condensation between the false wall and the external wall? Sounds like a bit of a specific one. We might need to pick that up.
You might want to ventilate that cavity, but I would have to take that on a case by case and look into it in more detail.
Yeah, we have access to a technical panel, so for a specific one, maybe get in touch with us directly, and we can pick that up with a specialist on that.
Lovely. That is great. And then
sorry, we are going to have to move on quite quickly.
It's the last one.
Yeah, very, really happy to answer it. Just pointing. Yeah, go
on. So in terms of understanding, if this is where to start, in terms of understanding property to define your solutions, what would you say are the key 3 or 4 things that you should be measuring, assessing?
Okay, so I've done a webinar on this with a colleague of, or I'm partly on this with a colleague of mine, but looking at things like brick bonds for, which is how the bricks look from the outside. You can identify whether it's a solid wall or a cavity wall or a system built building. Make sure there's no leaking gutters or other maintenance issues. So anything else to add to that?
No, you continue. Because it was defining solutions. What should we be measuring?
Maybe I jumped in too quickly. What was the second half of the question? Sorry, or can you reiterate the question? I'll just make sure I've answered it.
It was, so to help you understand the property and define solutions for it, what are the 3 or 4 things to look at?
So getting an experienced assessor in at the beginning, if it's not something you're confident doing, which most people aren't, obviously, and shouldn't have to be, get someone who is skilled and qualified to come and have a walk around with you. That could take the form of a full technical survey, which might take a couple of hours with air tightness and thermal imaging, or it could be a sort of much lower key thing where it's a sort of walk around, maybe with a thermal imaging camera, but just a discussion and a look at what you've got. Might be the first step. We also do, in certain areas, we do phone consultations. So you could send us some photos. You could have us on your smartphone or video call and walk around the house and show us things. That might be a first step.
Lovely.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jen.
So yeah, thanks guys.
That was so long on the main bit.
No, that was excellent. Really good. I mean, that covered a lot of topics there. Got some good comments saying thank you very much, very helpful. That's what we like to hear. So yeah, everyone, I will share these slides, drop in a few more links where appropriate, so you've got some extra reading to do. I'm sure you'll all be really pleased with that, and extra viewing. And also send some details if you do want to get some real specific technical advice with the tech panel. Please do that. It's not available for very long. It's only funded until the end of February.
Yeah, but we do intend to deliver more in the future after that as well. So do get in touch, and we'll do as much as we can. And hopefully we'll be funded in the future to do more.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Sophie, yes, there will be a recording of this as well. It will probably be tomorrow that I circulate that now. So yes, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for all your brilliant questions. It was really interesting going through them and quite good fun, me and Ben. It was 5:30 when we finished, but not too late here.
Enjoyed it.
Enjoyed the discussion. So hope it was useful for everyone.
Excellent. Right. See you next time, everyone. Thanks, Val. See you later. Bye.
Thanks very much.